Hello, team, and welcome to the kickoff of our 2021 Candid Conversations series. It's so great to be with all of you here today, and thanks for your calendar flexibility. As all of you know, we had to postpone one of our earlier sessions scheduled last month because of weather. So for those of you who may be new to joining us today for this series called Candid Conversations is something that we started last year. It became incredibly evident to us that one of the things that we needed to do as leaders, as people and colleagues who wanted to continue to build an inclusive culture where everybody belongs, that we had work to do, right? And that there is always work to do when we're talking about diversity, equity, and inclusion, and we're talking about building a high-performance, growth-oriented culture and team. With the killings of unarmed Black people last year with George Floyd and Ahmaud Arbery and Breonna Taylor, we realized that we needed to step up and engage in a conversation that, yes, at times could be uncomfortable, but it was a discussion that we needed to have and will continue to have. And I'm so pleased today to continue that conversation where we will explore some of the things that we're doing here at AT&T, but also very, very importantly, because this is not an opportunity that solely sits within our corporate environment, but one that sits out in the communities in which we live, work, and play. So we've got a couple of community members with us as well. As you all know, the topic of systemic racism and social injustice is one that all of us face, right? All of us face, regardless of who you are. And kind of as a refresher to what do we mean when we say systemic racism or social injustice or structural racism? It is those things that exist in policy, in culture, in behaviors, in beliefs that have been built up and developed over time that make it more difficult for Black people, for Indigenous people, for people of color to fully engage in the economy and to fully engage in society at large. And that is the inspiration for our Candid Conversations series, which we'll be carrying on throughout the entire year. And thanks for your continued feedback. So I'd like to start by introducing our guests for today. This is our fourth in this series. And first, we've got no stranger to this team, although as he and I were talking just before, this is, I think, the first time, Corey, that you and I have done a little bit of a fireside chat in front of my AT&T business team. So we're really thrilled to have you. Corey is our Chief Diversity and Development Officer. He's got just over 25 years with the business, right? Corey's had numerous job responsibilities over his incredibly tenured and storied career in wireless, finance, marketing, network operations, and HR. He is a great friend, a wonderful colleague, and one of the things I love best about Corey is that he shares an equal passion. He and I have found each other in kindred spirits in terms of our commitment to people and our commitment to community in the most comprehensive of ways. Yeah. So welcome, Corey.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, it's wonderful. Next, I'd love to welcome two guests who are from the Dallas-Fort Worth area. Lowry Manders is a mom. She's a singer. She's a writer and a former teacher in the Lake Highlands School District. For those of you who are in the Dallas-Fort Worth area, I think that's in Richardson ISD, if I'm not mistaken. She has a passion for social justice and reform and was influenced by growing up in the diversity of the Dallas school districts in the magnet schools. And she also spent a summer serving and learning in a Black township of South Africa. We'll hear more from her in a little bit. And I'd also love to welcome Denita Jones. Denita is also a mom. She's a lifelong community advocate, including working for the Poor People's Campaign in Texas. She's presented research across the nation, as well as the Mississippi Political Science Association, and focus on minority communities. Her mother was an educator, and her dad also worked in law enforcement, which also influenced her path and her passion for becoming a public servant. And so welcome, Lowry and Denita. We're thrilled to have you here with our AT&T colleagues all around the world. So welcome. Okay, so Corey, I'm going to start with you first. So let's start with a lens on our culture, our progress, and our commitment. So in 2020, which, gosh, can I just say it feels like ages ago.
Like 10 years ago.
I know, it feels like 10 years ago. Our new CEO, John Stankey, he shared that a very important message about our diversity and inclusion opportunity, as well as our commitment to always stand for equality. Can you give us some insight on what progress we've made in the area of social justice since John really kind of made that declaration and that commitment to the marketplace?
Absolutely, I can. And before I answer that directly, let me say this before we get into this conversation. I forget to do it. So a huge thank you, Ann, to not only for today's event, but for this entire series and the fact that you continue to lead on this issue in our business. If you all have known Ann for some time, then you know, as I always say all the time, she's not new to this, she's true to this. Ann has been doing this work for a very long time in our business and leading on this front, and both internally and externally. So just a huge thank you for that, because you've set a great example for the rest of us as leaders of teams. July 27, 2020 is when John Stankey sent that message out, and the rest of the leaders around his table sent messages as well. And we did do something we had not done before, and we were very transparent with the demographics of our workforce, from the most senior of leaders down to our frontline employees. So that was one. And then we made a series of commitments in those messages as well. And so I would tell you, as I look back, over the last probably 8-9 months now, I think we've done a really good job of delivering on those. And let me be specific about a few of them. In that note, in that message, he said that, hey, not only am I sharing what the demographics of our leadership profile looks like today, but I'm going to continue to share this information on a quarterly basis with the senior leaders in our company. So check that box. We're doing that now. We produce what we call quarterly progress reports for all leaders who have organizations, our senior leaders, and even our general managers that have organizations that are 1,000 people or more. And so this data shares everything from promotions to lateral movement to hires, retention data, et cetera. So we've done that. John talked about, hey, we're going to address some of the gaps. Those gaps being defined as, if you look at the demographic profile of our frontline employees, compare that to our senior leaders, and we get less diverse the farther away you get from the customer. And we acknowledge that is not ideal for us, and we're going to do some things to address that. And so we put into place plans. There are tangible plans that every business unit has. Ann has her own. She and I have walked through hers as well. But every leader like Ann across this business has a business plan that they're executing on. And then John said, hey, we're going to drive accountability relative to these plans as well. So it will become a part of each leader's performance evaluation, how they are performing relative to that plan. So all of those steps, all of those things are in place now. We also committed that we were going to raise the level of awareness around racial literacy in this business, which we have started that as well. In the fourth quarter, all of you had an opportunity to participate in Hindsight, which was the first step as a part of our Equality First learning experience that we're going to have throughout the year to address that issue. We talked about what we were going to do externally and how we were going to impact positive change externally. And so I'm proud to say at this point, especially around social justice, police reform, et cetera, we've partnered with, I think we're up to about 17 states now, Ann, where we've been partnering with the leaders around legislation, and then we've made investments in addition to that. So we've already spent over $200 million or so with various organizations. We committed additional 30 or so last year, and we continue to do that work in the neighborhood, the communities. And so bottom line is we made probably 6 or 7 commitments last July, and we're following through on every single one of those.
Yeah, Corey, thanks so much. I think, I was aware of much of that activity, but I hadn't heard the latest stats around it, right? And, for our team, if you think about this, right, we are putting our money and our brawn, right, where our mouth is, right? I mean, what we said, we're actually trying to and are committed to making systemic change, helping catalyze systemic change, not just inside of our company, but outside of our company, right? I mean, that's actually incredible that we have that many engagements in states across America already.
I love the way you characterize it when you said our brand.
Yeah.
And we are putting the weight of our brand behind a number of these efforts externally, and it's making a difference. We just joined the 110 Pact as an example. It's a consortium of companies around the country that have committed to hiring 1 million Black employees over the next 10 years. And AT&T is in the group of founding companies for that effort. When we reach out to our legislators on a local, state, or federal level, we're AT&T. So one of the cool things about that is we can get an audience, and we can go and share what's important to our customers and to our employees and help drive some of the changes you referenced.
Yeah, no, that's great. So this, it's a fairly complex environment right now out there, right? And I suspect it's going to be that way for quite some time. And so whether you look culturally, politically, or economically, where do you think we are as an organization, and what should we be leaders doing within the company, if you will? Part of the inspiration for this particular Candid conversation to have you and Lowry and Denita is the hope that we kind of spark some inspiration in people, right? About, so what is it that I can do? I've always had this point of view, I know you agree, that every single person can be a leader if you choose to be, right? And in this arena, I really feel so passionately that everybody, should lean in, right? Because that's when we will really change, right?
I agree.
So what do you think we should, so what do you think we are? I mean, honestly, what do you think we are as an organization? And then what would you ask the leaders across the organization to consider?
So let me start. As an organization, I like where we are. And let me be really clear about something as we have this conversation. At times, if I give us as a team some positive recognition, please don't misunderstand that as me saying, hey, we've succeeded or we're finished, right? Because we all know there's a lot more work that we have to do. But I like where we are because there's no question that we have the commitment and buy-in from our board, from our CEO, every leader around that table, from McElfresh and you and all the leaders around that table. And that's huge, right? I can't overstate how important that is, that we have the commitment to have positive change there. So I feel really good about that. I feel really good about the momentum that's in the business around our employees wanting to engage and lean in and learn more about these issues and learn how they can have more productive conversations about that. So I think we're in a good place there, and we're pacing in a way that I think will be helpful. In terms of what we can do as individual leaders, because you're absolutely right. None of this matters if we don't personally, as an individual leader, embrace it and go operationalize it. I think there are two things, and I'm a broken record on this, that I think are extremely important that we have to do as an individual leader. Number one, and this will really be life-altering for us, is step outside of our echo chambers. Yeah. We absolutely have to step outside of our echo chambers. Quit consuming information from sources and individuals who already think, feel, and believe how we think, feel, and believe. That's number one. Number two, avoid the binary thinking, because as we talk about these issues and we try to solve for them, and unfortunately, too often we approach them in a binary way, meaning we believe there's only one of two possible outcomes. And that's very problematic because these issues are way more nuanced than that, right? And you end up naturally thinking my answer or solution is the only right one, and so you automatically alienate the folks that you're trying to connect with. So I think those two are really important. And then the third thing I would add is if you're not able to identify something that you have sacrificed in your efforts around this work, then I would say, hey, you still have more work to do.
Gosh, I love that, Corey. At our kickoff, at our leadership kickoff this year, I had a chance to host Brene Brown. In a fireside, right? And so we really unpacked this topic of vulnerability. To your point of, if you haven't put yourself in a situation where you're sacrificing something or you've become vulnerable, right, consciously, then quite frankly, you haven't actually been courageous enough in this area. And these topics require courage, right? Which is the opposite of comfort, right? Which is what we learned from Brene.
Absolutely.
So thank you for that. And thank you too for the just so simple and compelling framework of listen, understand, and act, right? I mean, I reference that all the time, whether it's internally or externally, because it's so basic, but yet it's so powerful, right? And we have to go through we have to be committed to kind of those three parallel paths to really make progress. Yeah. So thank you. So so you've touched on a lot of this progress that we made both outside the company and then also inside of the company. But both you and John have said there is more work to do. And by the way, that is no stranger comment to those of us at AT&T, right? There's always more work to do, right? And one thing that I also want to say to you and to John and the company is to say thank you for your acknowledgement of the outrageous rise in hate crimes for the AAPI, the Asian American Pacific Islander community. Quite honestly, it's an issue that hits very home to me, and I'm going to write about it, but right now I'm in a really furious and sad place about it. But the fact that our company has stepped up and said, hey, we stand together in any issue which marginalizes anybody in society, and that could be gender-oriented, religious-oriented, racially-oriented, or anyone, right? And so thank you for championing what is right.
So important.
Yeah.
Right? So important. And thanks for mentioning that, because again, there is not any one segment or one group of employees that we prioritize. But yeah, it's incredible. I was, reading earlier this week or last week, 1,900%. That's the percent increase of violence towards Asian Americans since COVID.
Yep.
Unbelievable. And so it has to be addressed.
Yep.
Right? And we have to be proactive in how we address it. So yeah, we felt the need to make sure as a company we acknowledge it, recognize it, and do what we can. And it was good to see that the new president and that administration has acknowledged it as well and are outlining some steps that they're going to take. But this is another one of those issues, and that, as you said earlier, as individuals, we can do a lot about that, right? We may not be the person who's actually committing some violent act towards someone, but are you in a conversation where you hear something that's inappropriate? Right, that's said with respect to this, and then you don't say anything.
That's right.
Right, and so there are things that we can do as individuals to drive this, and we don't have to be the person who's pushing, attacking some elderly person on the street.
Yes. Yeah.
But if you're silent, then you're a part of the problem.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. So, can you give us your point of view as it relates to the urgent need now? Why is it now that we need to bring more and more awareness to the needs of Blacks and other minority and underserved communities? Like, why is the time now?
I think now because for a few reasons. One, because of everything that happened last year. I think the folks are paying closer attention to these issues than they probably have, at least in my professional career, if not ever. So we need to make sure we take advantage of this, right? While we have folks' attention and people's willingness to engage and learn about these issues, number one. Number two, as a company, AT&T cannot be successful if we don't have an environment where we're able to take advantage of every ounce of talent of every individual in this company. We have to, and I'm preaching to the choir here. You and your team understand this, how important it is for us to win in the marketplace. You can't do that if you don't have an environment that can, leverage and fully utilize all of the talent inside the business. So that's incredibly important. And then as a broader society, I think we have to do it because we really are at this inflection point. And I think if we don't take advantage of this and change, our behaviors and how we value these various communities, then I think as a country, we risk taking too many steps backwards, which will prevent us from being as competitive as a country on every front, right? And so I think you have to do it now. We don't have the luxury of waiting or trying to figure out a different path. You have to take advantage of the moment we're in.
Yeah, that's right. And it is about moving forward, right? We absolutely need to learn from history, but we don't want to repeat it, right? And this is about moving forward. Yeah. Thank you, Corey, so much for those insights. We're going to pivot now to both Lowry Manders and Denita Jones. And both, as I mentioned before, are parents. They are community activists. They are active in the fight against racism. And a little bit of their story, but I'm going to want them to tell their story in their words. But for context, following the killing of George Floyd and the protests that follows and Black Lives Matter, they both recognized that there was a need to be better and do better And they found each other and they put resources together and formed the Lake Highland Area Moms and More Against Racism. It's kind of a mouthful. I won't try to do the acronym. Both Larry and Denita know we love our acronyms here at AT&T, so I'm resisting that. But what their organization is it's a nonprofit, grassroots-based organization committed to listening, learning, growing, and taking action together in the fight against racism, focusing on the strength and health of our diverse communities. They've got over 1,800 members on Facebook and growing in a conversation that is gaining momentum, right? And gaining breadth as well as depth. So welcome to both of you, and thank you again for spending the time with us. Lowry, I'm going to start with you. Could you share with us, like, why? What's the why? Tell your part of the story of how you came to this moment in this place, in this role, with this kind of championing of change in your DNA.
Well, you were asking Corey, why now? Why is this important now? And I would say it has been important for over 400 years for us to address as Americans. But now and last summer, it just felt to me like white people were finally open to it. More white people were open to becoming allies and addressing the racial inequalities and disparities that have existed in our nation for so long. And so I just sensed that before, when I had tried advocacy and talking about this, I'd been met with more resistance in my community of mostly white people, white families. And so people that were even afraid of using the words black and white. But I noticed that people were more open to it. Their hearts were torn open because of the video we saw. And so they were wanting some guidance in that. And that's why Denita and I came together. And I was hesitant at first. I went to my Black friends and said, is it okay that me, a white mom, is going to try to do this? And they actually said, yes, please. We need you to be the one leading this charge so that we can get more people in. So, right or wrong, that makes a difference. Having white allies bringing this to the forefront makes a big difference. And so, yeah, we've gotten involved in, whatever your interest is, whether it's healthcare, education, police reform, environmental concerns. We know racial disparities are present in all of those arenas. And so there's a place for everyone to step up, whether it's just changing your bookshelf in your home, changing your Twitter feed, and widening your circles. And that's kind of what we've created. It's a lot like what you're doing in your organization, is creating a beloved community so that we build those relationships, and from those relationships we learn and we gain empathy and we grow together. And then when crises hit, for example, the snowmageddon, we're there for each other to bring water and serve pizzas and do what needs to be done because we know each other.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Thank you for sharing that in terms of how you came to this moment in this place and what inspires you for change. Denita, could you share your point of view on just how you came to this place, how you came together with Lowry here, and what's your perspective on the timing, the urgent need now for a deeper level of engagement and leadership across our communities?
Sure, and I came to this. There's a deep urgency now because all of our children, all of us, have become desensitized to the killings of Black Americans on the street, being recorded. We all have just, oh, someone else has died. Oh, the police has killed someone else. It's become so ingrained in our culture that no one is upset. And when you're raising young Black men and they say to you, oh, mom, that was a white officer, nothing's going to happen. That strikes a chord with you, and you know something needs to be done. So that's the sense of urgency now. All of us have become guilty of not caring that a life has been taken so quickly, so abruptly, and so violently. And so that's the sense of urgency that we have. We have to communicate to our community and anyone that will listen to us that our lives do matter. And it's important for everyone to understand it's not about blue lives, it's not about all lives. No lives matter until Black lives start to matter.
That's right. That's right. I mean, you're
And
really,
and I'll
yeah.
just say, I think we what I felt was a desire to show solidarity with my Black neighbors who I knew were afraid. And so that we do that through our, say their names display that travels around, just by showing up and inviting and having conversations. So when we do that, it's to show our neighbors you're not alone, and that helps build our community. So that's why I think it's urgent, is because I had neighbors who were hurting and scared.
Yeah, no, I mean, what you both are highlighting and reinforcing is that what is required for us to move us forward is us working together, right? And Lara, your word around allyship, right? I mean, you consciously said, I've got to become a better, more engaged ally, right? I would argue you've even moved beyond that into advocacy, right? And so you're both an ally and an advocate. And Denita, I think, thank you for so poignantly pointing out the obvious, which is very uncomfortable, right? The fact that whether it's through media or our own individual biases, we've become a little bit numb, right? Which is not healthy. It's not normal. It's not what is required to move us forward as a society. And, what is needed now is for us to be uncomfortable, to have these discussions, to figure out what it's going to take to change, right? So now this can be such a, daunting thing, right? And one aspect of what really compelled me to have both of you here with us is you both decided to do something, right? And do something differently than had been done before. So Lowry, maybe I'll start with you on this question, and that is, what are some of the steps that your organization has done to drive awareness, to fight racism, and show how to model these anti-racism behaviors?
Well, one thing that comes to mind is what I mentioned, our say their names display, and that helped get us attention. But just grieving together is social justice frontline work. And when you do that, it builds the relationships and the solidarity. But I think the main thing we're doing is normalizing conversations. And that's what you guys are doing here, making it so people know, you know what, I can't avoid this conversation. I might as well become a part of it and learn from it and listen from it. And like Brene Brown says, be vulnerable in it. And I like her thinking too, is, and what I try to say is, I'm not here to be right, I'm here to get it right. So people learn from me as a leader when I make mistakes and own up to them. So just providing that safe space. And we do that with children in our play dates and with parents, and with we create safe spaces for people of color in different realms, and also our book club, just all kinds of places and spaces for people to be authentic with each other. I think that's the main thing we're doing, and creating this beloved community, that we learned from Dr. King, for belonging. So the community itself is a model for what we want our circles to be, our schools, our businesses, our boards, our PTAs. And I really think just modeling the steps towards radical empathy. So we're trying to move from, like Denita said, this response of pity and sympathy. And then the empathy is important, yes, but we're taking it a step further and taking action. And that's what we call radical empathy, to make some changes, just like your company is doing. When you feel the compassion for people because you have a relationship with them, then you want to take an action step. And there are simple action steps anybody can take. So visit our site. And it's not that hard. It's lamar.org is what we call it. And we've got action teams and people from all over the country helping learn with us and grow with us.
Yeah, thank you for that. Thank you for that. Denita, could you share some other actions that others do to fight racism? I mean, in your experience set, How can others have an impact? I'm just your thoughts on how we make progress through some successes that you've seen, maybe even learning from some of the failures or less successful attempts in the past?
Yes, so let me share with you and your audience that these are not out of the box ways to participate. Um, Speak up when you see something wrong. If someone is being offended or offensive, there's nothing wrong with you having someone's back, even if you don't know them. Speak up. Listen to um, a person of color with intentionality. Seriously listen to their conversations. Listen to what they have experienced. If you have a coworker that comes in and says, "Oh my God, I was scared to death. The police got behind me and I just didn't know what was going to happen." Don't you don't let your first statement be, "He's just a police officer. He's doing his job." It's different from for a person of color than it is for a non-person of color. When the police get behind you, no matter what person of color, whether you're Asian, Black, Hispanic, there's a there's something in you that speaks up. You sit up, you want to make sure, okay, I got my license, everything's in arm reach. I don't have to reach into the glove box. I don't have to reach into my pocket. Listen with intentionality and not with the vision of trying to correct someone's experience. Stop sliding people's experience because it demeans what their feelings. It's almost as if their feelings are not relevant. That's not what he said. That's not what he meant. Microaggressions, those are just everywhere, all across the board. Um, if you don't know how to say someone's name, ask. Take the time to learn how to say someone's name instead of always saying, "Excuse me, hey you," or Sheila when her name is maybe Chalet or something different. Learn to really pronounce someone's name. That's, and as a Black woman, let me say, you cannot ask me to touch my hair. Just simple little things like that can get you in the right direction because everyone is not on the same level of ready to deal with their anti-racism. And we understand that in Lamar, and we tell people everyone is not going to come in feet first ready to dive into these topics. So you have to take baby steps to get out of your comfort zone. You have to be willing to go to the next steps. And we are understanding that some people are not quite just there yet because these conversations are going to be uncomfortable in your household. They're going to be uncomfortable in your job when you really dig into doing the work of becoming an anti-racist or becoming an ally. It's going to get uncomfortable. And you have to know that there is a community around you that supports your uncomfortability. We're here. We have your back. It's okay to be uncomfortable. It's okay to step outside of your comfort zone. For people that are at work, you have coworkers that are people of color that are your friends, but do you socialize with them afterwards? Do you have intimacy afterwards? Or is that just your Black work friend? It's those simple things. They're inviting them to a wine tasting, a book club. It's those intentionality actions that will cross the bridge and force you all to have uncomfortable conversations because something will come up that needs to be corrected and you have to be ready to accept the correction.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And I would add just a few more basic steps. I mean, Danita's right. Just listening is the main one. But if you are a person of privilege like me, and you learn to accept your white privilege, then don't feel guilty about it. Use it. You just use your privilege. Use it for leverage. Use it to help advocate for others. There are lots of ways you can use it. Ask questions about equity at your PTA board, at your school board meetings of the city council.
Mhm.
Become a mentor to people who need it. That's one of the biggest things you could do. Our organization provides books to all the classrooms. That's one thing we did this year in our community to give windows and mirrors. Those are so important for children growing up to have images of people that look like them as a mirror reflected, and also windows for my kids to read books about people of other cultures. And all of that builds empathy. So it really, just like you've said, is across the board, something our whole community and nation should be engaged in. I would also say learn Spanish. That's one of the best things you could do to build a bridge too. So yeah, and just showing up to the conversations.
So simple yet so powerful. I mean, what both of you have shared here. What I think is so striking to me is, those of us sort of in the corporate environment, right? I mean, we have lived and embraced diversity, like sort of in our DNA, Corey, right? And so we've evolved as time has evolved, as the market has evolved, and you kind of, from a professional perspective, you kind of get it, right? The demographics of the market are changing, the workplace is changing. You got to really embrace, diversity, equity, and inclusion as an integral part of your strategy. But you guys have taken this into the home, right? You've taken this into the home with children and with parents and other moms. I'm going to ask both of you guys to maybe think about a story that you might share with our audience, right? Many people are parents out there. Many people, if they're not parents, they know children, right? Or mentor younger, people from a younger generation. Maybe you guys could share, in your experience of advocacy and driving change and the establishment of your organization, tell a story of where it was really difficult, right? A difficult conversation with a mom, in whatever circumstance, or something that you saw in a classroom, with a group of kids that really reinforced the why behind this, right? Because this is, it's not easy, right? It's not easy, and I will predict, because this has happened in every single one of these candid conversations that I've hosted, that I know going into this that not every single person tuning in, or those even who haven't turned in, will find value in this conversation. I know that there will be some who believe that this is not necessary, right? And it is my obligation as the leader to listen to their point of view and to seek to try to understand that point of view as well, right? Because that point of view is not unvaluable, right? It is just simply different, right? So could you guys maybe share just something that may come to mind that would be, that gives just a flavor of how you've carried this into families, into the parental environment with your network, into the school environment? That would be super helpful.
So as I introduced myself to our Facebook group, I shared, and once again, we say you have to be vulnerable. So as leaders of the group, we cannot not be vulnerable. We have to be the most vulnerable. And I shared with the group, do you know how long it takes you to get to Whataburger? Do you know how long it takes to go to Walmart? I do, because when I see my sons, and if they're not back in a specified time, I tend to worry. What has happened? Have they been pulled over? That's the concern every Black parent has when their children leave. We are concerned if they're coming back. We're concerned if they're pulled over. So that's how I reach families, because Larry doesn't experience that like I do. She doesn't experience it to that degree. And as far as being in the classroom, my children have unique names. They're not difficult at all. They're mostly 2 syllables. But my oldest name is Datiki, and he's very proud of his name. He's always been proud of his name. And a teacher decided that, well, I'm just going to call you DJ because I can't pronounce your name. That hurt him. This was a vibrant young man who was proud of his name, proud of where it came from. And in that one instance, a teacher took that pride away from him. And so you may think, oh, it's just a name. No, to him, it was a sense of pride, because that's what we instill in our children. Be prideful of who you are and where you're from, your family, your ancestors. Be prideful of that. And in that one instance, a teacher took that pride from him. And so that's how you can connect. That's how you make it personable. These are my stories. These are my lived experiences. These are my children's lived experiences. And this is how I'm telling you the world has treated them.
And Denita, I'm thinking about how just as easily a teacher can give a child that sense of safety and belonging, just like your son Dallas's teacher did at the beginning of the school year when we were all still virtual. And his little emoji classroom had a poster that said Black Lives Matter. And Dallas, well, Denita, this is your story to tell.
He cried and he told his teacher, "Thank you for thinking of me. I appreciate it." And my son is 11. And I promise you, 9 months later, he's still talking of that. It still means the world to him that that teacher had the forethought of just, you know what, after all of this, this is what I'm going to do for my students of color. And he was so welcomed by that. And it brought him to tears. And so it's just those little gestures that teachers can do, that parents can do. And it doesn't cost a dime. It doesn't cost a cent.
No, and to the point of why it's needed, for example, in one of my son's virtual classes a couple weeks ago, the teenagers had someone come in, Zoom bomb their class and write, this is terrible, write the N word all over the screen and put it in the chat. And it was because the substitute teacher was Black, and it was horrible. And so our Teens Against Racism group then had a conversation about the word and the history of the word, and it was led by a Black man who was able to communicate that. And it's just so important to give them opportunities to talk about their feelings when that happens, and to give some background, because these things are happening. We just opened a diversity little library in our neighborhood. So cute, lots of
Yes.
books, and so many people love it. But one mom of a preschool kid that went to that church stole our signs, stole our Lamar sign, stole our United Against Racism sign. So what we know is that there are people that somehow are threatened by even just the conversation. And so what we want to say, we want to be invitational to those people, and that's what you guys are doing too. It's okay to be white. It's what we're doing is recognizing, and this is a truth, there are racial disparities in our country that have existed for centuries, and we're finally starting to acknowledge them and reteach ourselves the history that has brought them along and try to undo some of that systemic racism. And that's just a truth. So I think it's okay to invite people into that conversation, but until people are ready to recognize that truth, it's hard to move forward together, like you were saying.
Mhm.
Wow, those are incredibly. They're just those stories hurt my heart, and it's I mean it's telling when you think about it. This is one community, right? And we have there are countless hundreds of thousands of communities all around the world, all around the country, where these things happen, right? And so, but what you guys have done is to demonstrate that change can happen, right? I mean, Denita, your beautiful story about your son, right? The fact that he was bolstered by in a positive way, right? By the teacher, in contrast to your other, son who was not, right? And we may think that those are just little episodes in the formation of an adult, right? But they are not. I mean, they are not, right? I mean, Corey, I don't know about you, if you were bullied or had racial encounters when you were growing up. I certainly know that I did.
Yeah.
Right. And I remember pretty much every single one. Yeah. Do you?
Absolutely. I grew up in rural Texas. And so in the school where in my entire high school, there were fewer than 10 Black kids. So yeah, I have a number of incidents, and to your point, I can remember many of those for sure. And I was fortunate enough to have parents who were wonderful and helped me deal with all of that in the right context. But yeah, we now have a term for it, right? We call them microaggressions, and sometimes they're not that micro.
Right.
And so we have a vocabulary that we use around them now, but they've been there for some time. But you know, one of the questions I had, Lowry, I'm really curious for you and Denita, and Lowry, this may be directed more towards you, is when you have the conversation, the vocabulary that we use now, and not only inside the company but outside as well, oftentimes creates some challenges for us. So when you use the terminology white privilege, when we use the terminology around systemic racism, et cetera, there are a number of folks who will reject that, you know, outright when they hear it. And so what I'm curious about, Lowry, you and Denita, is you have these conversations in the neighborhood, in your community. How do you deal with the folks who reject that and just say, hey, since that's where you guys are starting, then I don't want to be a part of this work at all?
Sure. And of course that happens. It's challenging to me, but I follow this path. There's a wonderful book called See No Stranger, which I highly recommend, by Valerie Carr. And the idea is to embrace everyone as a human. And I know you've talked about this. We are one human race. And to think that there's no such thing as monsters on the earth, just wounded humans. And I feel like a lot of that is just they're coming from a totally different echo chamber. There's nothing I can do to force them out of their echo chamber, but I can try to be invitational, and try to see everyone I meet as my brother, my sister, my aunt, because they are someone's brother, they are someone's grandfather. That is the first tool of anti-racism, is seeing everyone as part of a beloved family. I also think teaching people, one of the things we come across is people say, I don't see color. And that's just not true. So color is a fact. Race is a social construct. But the color is something our eyes and our brains process. So we talk and teach our children about color kindness, not color blindness. And that just means, yes, I see your color. I know it's an important thing to you, and you have experiences that have made you who you are based on your color. It's not your whole story. So I guess, Corey, just trying to see everyone as an individual instead of categorizing. And that is what we're trying to do when we identify our unconscious biases that we all have. Everyone has a story, even the people that disagree with me.
Cool. Thanks for sharing that, Lowry.
Yeah, yeah. Corey, any other questions that you might have for Lowry or Denita about this?
No, I think we've covered them. I think another point, though, and I think is really important to make in this conversation, and at AT&T, we do allow, there is space for folks to not necessarily agree with everything we're doing around DE&I, for sure. And we embrace that, to your earlier point, because we can learn and grow from those different perspectives as well. But one of the things I want to be ultra clear about, though, is that while we do have a space for that, we have been really clear, and John, myself, all of the leaders in this business, that it is not optional that we as leaders create a work environment and culture that is inclusive and is equitable. That is not optional.
That's right.
Whether or not you want to acknowledge or use terminology around privilege, that's fine. We're not going to spend a lot of energy on that. But it's not optional for us as leaders to create this environment and this culture where we're all going to respect each other as individuals and value what we bring to the table and embrace the differences that we have. That's not optional. So if you don't subscribe to that and you don't want to do that, then you have to rethink, hey, is this the right place for you to continue to build your career?
I mean, that really is, Corey, the foundation of winning as one, isn't it? Right?
It is.
Because winning as one means that we respect everyone.
Yes.
Right? And that is the power of any high-performing, growth-oriented team or culture, is that we figure out a way, right, in the ideal state, right, to harness the best of every single person and have everyone collaborate in a way, that is really meaningful,
Yeah,
right? Right.
absolutely.
So, yeah, for sure. Lowry and Denita, thank you so much for your thoughts and your insights. It's and for your passion and your commitment to championing change, right? One child, one person, one mom, one conversation at a time. I think it's really remarkable. Because when I talk to friends, sometimes you don't know where to start, right? In actuality, Corey, I find it easier to figure out what to do in a corporate environment, right?
Yeah.
You know, I happen to live in a community right now that is quite polarized, right?
Yes.
And I have been struggling just to figure out how to help and how to lean in, right? And I don't have it figured out yet, right? But it weighs on me.
Well,
because,
we
you know,
have it figured out for you, Anne.
You do?
You need
Okay.
to start a satellite group of Lamar in your community, because honestly, when people come out as allies, then more people come out. They feel emboldened to do that, and they feel
Yes.
empowered. So I think that's so important.
Yeah, that's wonderful. Well, I
So
love.
we can help you.
Okay, I know. That's great. Look at that, man. That's
Yeah.
awesome. I've got 2 more allies and 2 more
And
advocates.
you know, no one should feel overwhelmed, because we know no one can do everything, but everyone can do something.
Yes, that is a
Absolutely.
beautiful piece of advice. So what? Maybe I'll close it with you guys there. What would you ask, right? So we've got out there in our audience, whether they're here with us live or whether they'll come back and listen to this on replay, we've got thousands of leaders, right, who are responsible for critical parts of the business that are out there in our communities all around the world. If you had to ask them to do something or consider something, what would that be, right? And for a little help from my friends, try to make it a little attainable, right? So something that's not so lofty that we feel like, to your point, overwhelmed. But what would your message be to Corey and my colleagues out there, AT&T colleagues out there?
Denita, you go ahead and use your magic wand.
So typically when we close out our webinars, I ask our guests, you have this magic wand and you have one wish that you can take place with this magic wand, would it be? So I think for me, it would be asking these executives, have you created a brave space for your employees? Not a safe space, but a brave space, a space where everyone can speak openly how they feel on a certain situation and just start that dialogue there. I think we've done too much with safe space. Safe space is for where you come, say something, and no one else has anything else to say about it. And there's no repercussions for what you say, and no one can call you on what you say in your safe space. But with a brave space, everyone gets to say how this has impacted them.
I love that, Denita. And I would just say, as far as the phrase Black Lives Matter, that matter is the minimum when it comes to all our people of color. You guys are embracing this concept. The minimum is that people of color deserve to live in equity and have equal rights that we have to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. But beyond that, they are a beloved part of our community and they add so much. And my life is diminished if I don't embrace them as part of my beloved community. Your business is diminished. The music industry, the art industry, every industry is diminished if we don't embrace people of color with equity. So matter is the minimum, is what I would say.
Yeah, that's so powerful. Our former chairman, right? I mean, it's like one of those moments, right? Our former chairman had, he made an infamous speech. I guess it was back
Fall 2016.
Yeah, right.
Yep.
And he was like, we have to move beyond, from beyond tolerance, because tolerance is
It's for cowards.
right? And we've got to move to understanding, right? And that's what you're saying. Is matter is not. That's not enough, my gosh, right? I mean, matter is not enough. Gosh, so many rich takeaways here, Corey, right? I was like writing furiously around this. Team, when you think about the lessons, think about the progress that we've made, think about how much work there is still yet to do. Some of the things that I wrote down here is, it's important to speak up. It's important to create not a safe space, but a brave space. It's important to listen with intentionality. Don't just be an ally, but be an advocate, right? I love that. Normalize the conversation, right? Which means you've got to be courageous, right? Invite others in. Create an environment of belonging. Be cognizant of microaggressions, right? Both those that you may have within yourself, by the way, right? As well as those which you recognize with others. One of the ahas that I had in I guess it was our third Candid conversation, was that we actually all have elements of racist behavior. We all have it, okay? We all have it because we all have bias, and you know how passionate I am about this topic of unconscious bias. We all have it because we're human, but it doesn't mean that we're all racist, right? But if we don't do something about our racist behavior, right, then by omission, as Corey said, right, as Lowry said, if we don't do anything about it, then in fact we are allowing ourselves to become racist in our actions or in our thoughts, right? So use your privilege, use your power, use your platform for good, right? It's what AT&T is doing,
Absolutely.
right? It is what these amazing leaders are doing. Here at community leaders and public service advocates are doing. And it is what each one of us as leaders at AT&T have an opportunity to do, right? If ever there was a time to dare to lead, right? It's now, right? It's now. And so I hope that this discussion has compelled all of you, yet in a different way, right? In a different way. And that's how we try to shake it up with these Candid conversations, to share with you multiple different kinds of perspectives and discussions on many of the topics that absolutely matter. And so, you know, in John and Corey's words, again, there's more work to do. There will always be more work to do. So don't feel, and Lowry, I'll take your coaching here. I'll try not to feel overwhelmed because I often at times on this topic feel like, gosh, there's so much work to do and I want to make so much progress, right? And sometimes it is just the most simple of things that can make such an impact, and don't underestimate the power of that. Lowry and Denita, thank you so much for gracing us with your presence, sharing with us your passion. If somebody wants to follow up with you guys on a contact, Lowry or Denita, can you repeat where they can find you? What's the best way to find you guys?
Lamar.org is our website, LHAMAR, lamar.org. And you can find us there or on Facebook. And thank you guys for being partners in what we say, make good trouble at the end of all our meetings in honor of John Lewis. So thank you for making good trouble.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
We are committed to do so, right? All right, and so thanks, team. You know, we've got resources, and we'll send that that URL out there as well, so all of you have it. But we've got plenty of resources on our D&I website, team. You know, we'd encourage all of you to go out there and visit the Listen, Understand, and Act site that's on HR One Stop. Check out those resources. They're there to help you, kind of make your own path and decide what course of action you would like to take, whether that's in your work groups, whether that's in your community, whether it's in your family, with partners or otherwise. So our next Candid conversation is scheduled for Monday, April 5th. This is the one that was rescheduled from Snowmageddon, earlier. And we're going to hear from a few of our other colleagues who are going to share some of their personal stories with some of the challenges and opportunities that they have faced as people of color. So we'll take we'll take another opportunity to share some stories, listen, engage, understand, and continue to make progress. Okay, and so thank you all for taking the time out of your very, very busy days serving clients. I appreciate all that you do for our business. I do appreciate all that you do for our customers, for each other, and for our communities. Keep up the great work, team, and we'll look forward to seeing you again soon. Thanks again, Corey and Denita and Lowry.
Thank you.